Okay. Going to chish. Kewe yuxatini. Ke yuxatini. Chish just a cut you han. Yeah, achtuasagu we nouns dot aya. Tlingit enach asayi edu asa noun. Yeah, achtuasagu katain adat. Tiyatunk. Titla a. Dasa way asayi. Wanach sawe ya. Ye awecho ach ke hinak edach. Ya shedeheni as aya as kwani has to sanku aya ya waka duk duk she ke shish shach chai shedeheni at aqa ya waka Tlingit awe uhan ajawe has to sanku to sakun. Aqa ye awe ho achtsu has to she to nach Tlingit at usku to wa ach. Ye awe ha Tlingit in the tani ada. One qanin sagt was saku just chuya ha yuchatangi kakhwash. Yata aya after was saku gachtu latin. Just yata ayata. Wasa wushtin away just the cut. So the starters in talking about nouns and sort of how they work. The Tlingit word for nouns was given to me by John Martin, who calls it asayi. Are you the only one who gets an A+? Did anybody else get their little dry erase board thing? F minuses all around. Would you like to show the universe what you have done? You have succeeded tremendously. Everybody else that's out there, you should have something like this in the very near future, like let's say Tuesday. Because we'll be able to write things on there. Yeah. Put a high tone over the E. Kesh ush keh. Right, we'll have to put that right next to the camera. It says, no good. Conjugating verbs is important. One time I saw there was a student who was a distant student. Oh, somebody else. A+. Everybody else, keep trying. Keep trying to acquire a tiny erase board. I know you can do it. Tiny erase. Spiritual strength, and maybe PFDs. Maybe everybody's waiting for the permanent fund so they can spend $3.
I just got a MacBook, so maybe I can afford dry erase board.
There might be one in the little vending machine out there that has no food.
Oh, maybe.
No food. Maybe that's
Take such everything.
Now there's nothing in it?
They're going to put food in it.
Oh, okay. In the long run, we're looking at programs, just so you guys know. I want to talk about a couple opportunities, and then I'll come back to my little speech there in a second. Princess Cruises had a meeting with some of us here, and they're interested in hiring about 6 language students to work on the boats next summer as cultural interpreters, performers, type of things, to be part of their entertainment. This has the possibility of being very phony, but it also has the opportunity of being really awesome.
Who's it?
Princess Cruises. And you're part of like a team. Like you get like a nice suite, you eat a good food on the boat. But I had some very real questions. My questions were, does this person have creative control of their own content? Because if they sang a song, and then say went home and said, hey, I sang this song, and somebody says, you can't sing that song for money. You know, you can't sing that song to people like that. And then if they went back and someone said, hey, sing that song, and they said no, and then if it became an issue, like they would have to have control. The other question I had is, are people serving alcohol where these performances are taking place? Because that could become weird. So the answer was no, but people might be bringing things in. They don't really control that. Then the other questions I had was, could this person distribute pamphlets that explain why people should buy authentic native art and why buying imitation stuff actually hurts our people in our communities? And they said, they were a little nervous about that question, but they said yes. They said they couldn't direct them to specific stores, but we could develop something through maybe Alaska and Central Council that just talks about why buying authentic native art.
And how to identify. There are pamphlets that show you how to identify. It's like a hand.
Yeah, there's the silver hand.
Yeah, the silver hand program is two-edged sword because there's artists who don't participate in it for various reasons. And so basically, you have to educate the consumer on what is authentic.
Right.
I mean, the silver hand, for example, I don't sell it now to spend the $80, $90 a year for registration and then keep buying silver hand tags. Each time I need them, I can't afford it. And then you have very famous artists who don't participate in the program because they rely solely on the name.
Also, if you're outside of Alaska, you cannot participate in that program.
Mm-hmm.
But Central Council is developing a certified tribal artist program. So that would be something different as well. And so, again, it's not to push people towards a specific direction, but it is to say, ask that person if it's native made. If they say yes and it's not, that it's breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like some fake Indian just got arrested. At a
Yeah, I
bar,
remember that.
right? And he can't sell his art for a long time. So. Anyways, that was one update. And so it's a possibility. But what I said, could we do a 7-day training on one of your cruise ships where we have an immersion on the cruise ship and we train these people, we bring elders and other speakers? And they said it was a possibility. Oh my God.
Yeah. Can we just like get a clam house on the cruise ship?
And keep everybody else out.
I think Hunatona does something like that with them in Glacier Bay.
Yeah, and so Hunatona does this cultural interpretive training thing. Tlingit Haida just got awarded the Thane property, which they plan on transforming. And one of their ideas is everybody who works there has to be proficient in either Tlingit or Haida. It's pretty exciting. And these are just ways that language is being elevated. There's ongoing discussions with the immersion preschool and charter school, which hopefully is going to start this year. Douglas Indian Association, I heard today, just got awarded a grant, although it's unofficial because like some government federal money freeze or something. I don't know. But they got.
Because they have to pass the funding for the rest of the.
Right.
Yeah.
So now everything's delayed.
Yeah, at the federal level.
But they got notice. Golden Heritage Foundation was awarded a project which puts a totem pole up on Sandy Beach in commemorating the village that was burned down there, and then a smaller totem pole at Gastineau Elementary, which commemorates the graves that were built upon when they built that school, along with a lot of cultural interpretive stuff. So the idea is to try and get somebody who could tell that story in Tlingit and then translate it from. Exciting stuff. Those are just general updates. Back to my discussion. So sometimes what we do in here is we sort of break the language into pieces. Not everybody likes to do that, and I understand. The idea is to say, let's look at this component, let's look at this component, let's look at this component, now let's look at how all these things mesh together. And the idea is sometimes we're reading off these tables, and sometimes we're doing all this other stuff, but the goal is to get us to the point where the more we hear Tlingit, the more we read Tlingit, the more we speak it, the more we write it, we're thinking about how all these components get put together. My experience is I see a lot of people who go through a lot of different language classes, and I can talk to them, but they can primarily respond in English. So for our goal as language learners is to unlock the ability to put the language together so that we can just speak it freely, right? And so if we see porcupine, we can have a conversation about the porcupine, whether it's, hey, he walks really slow, hey, I spoke Tlingit to a porcupine in Fairbanks, and he stood up and looked at me. That's what you're doing. Or, you know, somebody threw their sweater on a porcupine and he walked away with it. Yeah, and so there's all kinds of stuff you can do. You do funny stories, you do stories, you can do descriptions. We did this exercise in Carcross a couple of summers ago. Maybe it was 2 summers ago. And one of the things we did, so when we're learning nouns, we're learning the names of things. Asayi, its name. That's what that means. Asayi. Everybody say asayi. Asayi.
Asayi.
So we had this project a couple years ago. A friend of mine who's a filmmaker got funding to make a movie about red and yellow cedar. And so he approached me and said, can you get a couple Tlingit speakers together and we'll just talk about the differences between red and yellow cedar. So I asked Kehi Nok and King Beastie, John Martin and David Katzen. He said yes. We did it on a couple days' notice. They didn't have a whole lot of time. They made some notes. And when we sat them down and we started filming, like if you ask my thinking about this comment that you can't talk about science and Tlingit. Like, if you ask a scientist this question, they'll probably just say, oh, well, you know, red cedar has these properties and yellow cedar has these properties and this, and then we just move into this sort of analytical mode of talking about these things. That's what I believe would probably happen. But when we said, okay, the camera's rolling, some of the really, and this one's on YouTube, you can find it on there. Since I've been broadcasting classes, I now have like 1 million videos out there, and most of them are classes, but there's a little tab under the YouTube channel, which is YouTube/UASANLS. So that's University of Alaska Southeast, Alaska Native Languages Studies. If you go to there, that'll get you right to the channel. There's a channel for classes, there's a channel for fluent elders. I think there's channels for silly videos or lessons. I don't know. But under the fluent elders is where you'll find this one, and many others. You can listen to these. Under tlingitlanguage.com, under the resources audio tab, you can download a lot of these. I just found the COTS audio the other day. I'm super excited. That story's in Hashika. Anyway, so when we said, okay, go, there are some really interesting things if you watch this video, getting the inside perspective, was turn taking is really interesting in languages, right? Because we're all sitting around speaking English, there's different ways I can cue everybody that I want to talk. And one of the ways that people do that is by going, they make a little clicking noise in their mouth, right? And you probably don't think about it, right? But once somebody told me that, I'm like, did I make that noise for a reason? Or is it because somebody told me this is the noise we make? But there's little cues you give to say, I would like to speak. And if we're all speaking Tlingit, there's different ways, verbal, nonverbal, like I might say, oh, what? And this is saying, I would like to talk. But what's interesting is there was 2 of them that were filming, and then they asked me to talk as well. But there was one person, John Martin emerges as a sort of conversation leader. So he's saying, I'm going to go, now you go, I'm going to go again. Right? And so it was really interesting to see those dynamics. But what's really fascinating is we just gave one question. Differences. So when he starts talking about the tree people, us Hwani. When we say Hwani, that's taking a generally non-human thing and making it into, you're talking to the spirit, like Hoots Hwani, you're talking to the spirits of the brown bears. You're talking to them as if they're people because they understand Tlingit. And so he's talking about Asapwani. Then he starts naming all these different trees. And I'm watching. Then when he gets done, he says, we are Tlingit because we know those names. Right? And this is a fundamental concept of why we start with nouns. We're learning the names of these things. This is what they've been called in this particular region for over 10,000 years. And so some of these things they just know. When you say that word to them, they know that word. And the other thing, as far as concepts go, is, and then they just sort of, they keep going, and the conversation is really fascinating. I think there's still a few typos in there. I got to review it and fix it. But it has subtitles on there, so you could watch it, I think, in Tlingit or English. Maybe both, I can't remember. You should check out that video and others. And just walk around, listen to Tlingit. In particular, if you know the translation, sometimes it helps your mind push the two pieces together. Any thoughts? Okay, so we're going to take a look. We're going to just do some nouns, I think. Let's go there. Working off of this book, there's been several. Oops. Let me set up my screen sharing. There's been several updates to this book. So let me make this a little smaller. So I'd recommend. I'll send a link out for an updated print version. If you guys want to buy a print version, there's no money. Nobody makes any money off of this. It's just the cost of production. Or you can just download it. If you go to tlingitlanguage.com under Intermediate Tlingit or Resources. And I would recommend downloading the new one. Just fix some typos, found a couple things that needed adjustments. So let's just go section by section here. You guys should have read all of this. We talked about this Tuesday. So in thinking of these first few sections, learning Tlingit, the Tlingit language, grammatical terms, before we move into this section on nouns, which we're going to talk about, anybody have anything they want to point out or maybe you want clarification on, or you have thoughts about reading in any of those opening chapters?
I really like all the quotes, and I wish there was I always get these quotes and I kind of remember the English really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try and find where I found them originally, and it's I can't find them ever. I wish there was like a single place where there were a bunch of awesome quotes.
That would be a good idea.
Because I find them and then I remember the English and I'm like, where did I
But I
read
don't know
that?
how to say that.
Where did I read that even? So I go through everything and then I can't find it sometimes.
Okay.
I don't. I mean,
You should just compile all your awesome quotes and stuff.
Okay, make it a note. Send me. Never have paper. I don't have a little dry erase board. I just need one piece of paper.
Make it into the paper you're told.
I just need one standard size piece of paper. Okay, so assemble. I'll do this. I'll put it on a section here on tlingitlanguage.com. Because I want to do another one too and include proverbs is what we call them, and these sort of things that you can say them, but they mean something really significant in the language, right? And so, like for example, if somebody says, I'm just going to go along as a baler, even if they said that in English, but if they, especially if they say that in Tlingit, does anybody know what that refers to?
From he tears the sea lion in.
Duktut, it's from the Duktut story, because when they all go out, he says, I'll just come as a baler. And that's a proverb, it's a saying. And it just means, and these are really hard to define. I've tried, but I don't think I get them. But for me, it means I'm just going to go and do, the most simple or maybe the least glorious job, but I'm ready. I'm ready for anything in that case. Call him, if I need to help, I'm going to step forward and help. So that's where these things sort of come in. Any other thoughts on these opening sections? You should definitely read them if you haven't read them. Last year, I would ask these questions, not these, but I ask other questions sometimes. And then from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I translated that teacher's lines. Cha-asa, cha-asa, Oh, awesome. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, we'll move along. We'll do lists of nouns, and that'll keep us going. So we've talked about this a little bit, and we're going to learn there are types of nouns in Tlingit. Okay, there are types of nouns, and it's good to know what type of noun you're looking at, right? So like if we look at this name, Tauquetli, there are two nouns in that name. What are the two nouns?
Winter and egg.
Winter egg, right? I think it refers to ravens laying their eggs in the winter. So the first thing we have is we have common nouns. These are everyday nouns, and the big thing about common nouns is if somebody takes possession of them, they gain a possessive suffix, right? So that's what makes a common noun, okay? It just means it can be possessed. It can be possessed, and it does not need anything, it doesn't need to be possessed. Because when we look at some other ones, kinship terms, body parts, those need to be possessed. They need to have a possessive pronoun attached to them. So within that, we have basically really old, and this is a theory. It's just a theory. I might be wrong. I don't think there's anything incorrect about speculating about things as long as you're taking educated guesses. But there's certainly what are probably really old words in Tlingit that all they mean is that is the name for that particular thing, right? Yake, hoots, cake. Those words originate in Tlingit thought. Who knows how they came into being? All we can do is we could talk to our elders and we can try and guess. But then the second type are what we call compound nouns. So compound nouns tend to be longer than 2 syllables especially. And then there's some translation. You can have a literal translation for it, right? So we have some of them, they come from verbs. Ganda da goo goo. Everybody say ganda da goo goo. Ganda da goo goo. It's a woodpecker, okay? And it comes from gun, which is wood or firewood. Da is around. Dagook is the verb to peck on something.
Is there a different word for a live tree then? If gun is firewood.
Os is this the default for tree. And in the Tlingit mind, it's probably a spruce tree. But it could be sort of like when you say chat, that's a salmon or that's a fish.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Tlingit mind, it's a salmon unless you tell me or show me otherwise.
Because it makes sense, the woodpecker when it pecks, usually it's creating a hole to stash something on dead wood.
Yeah, so gun is more like saying wood. So it could be the living tree, and it also means firewood.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, in certain forms, could mean fire. But it usually goes low tone when it's fire. It's a little bit hard to tell.
That's the same word as India. Gun is for is wood.
Oh, really? Awesome. Yeah, and that's probably a very old word. Da is around or about, right? And so you're going to see this all over the place. D with 2 A's, around or about. And we'll talk about how that word functions. But it could be like saying, I'm walking around the house. Or it could be, I'm talking about you. So another one, here's another compound. Hintakuzi.
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 Was there a question out there? Or am I just hearing folks say?
Yeah, we were talking about the fact you were referring to caught being, I know the word to be all-encompassing of all fish, and more specifically inland would be if we're referring to trout, and you're saying referring to salmon.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's probably going to have some regional variations between inland and the coast, especially. Sort of like if you say tree, it depends where you're at in the United States, what kind of tree people probably think of. And it's not like this is what it means, but this is probably what the listener is going to think of when you say it. And sheesh. So this one, if we break it down, heen, and we know that's a long vowel and it's high, is water. Talk is inside of a container or a vessel. So we say hin talk. One of the things that happens in Tlingit consistently when we form compounds is everything except for the last word tends to get short and it tends to go low. Right? If it's low, it stays low, but if it's high, it will go low. So hin talk. And you'll have a few hin talk things. And as people create new words, which we've been doing forever, we can use these sort of principles. So we get descriptive. Brown bear in the water is the word for polar bear. I've also heard glade hoots, white bear. Here's another one. This is combining a verb and a noun. So the verb is turning into basically an adjective. It's the wise or the intelligent, might be a more accurate translation, the intelligent songbird. So there's the word for pigeon. It's probably not what we would think of today, but my instinct is that when Tlingits heard of it, there were messenger pigeons, and that sounds like a pretty smart bird to me, right? Tie something around and say, send this insult paper to Nietzsche, and then he would go find him, right? And so, and here's another one, and this is where the name for a particular group of people can function as an adjective as well. Guski kwan uwu. Guski kwan uwu. Guski kwan uwu. So Guski Kwan is the name of an old name for Europeans, and uwu means it's another word for a type of wood. It's a little bit different. Okay. And so this you can have as well. So you could have maybe that could be the name. And one of the elders we were working with, said that's fine, that works for celery. Right? And so these are the ways that you might invent words for things or work with elders and come up with words for the things that we may not have words for yet. Another way for nouns to be built is by having a verb and adding to the end, which we've talked about. So it usually means the one who something, and then we have a verb root there. Shita. 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 Huayna. 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 Kuhida. 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 And this K-O-O at the beginning is usually referring to it being cylindrical. So we're going to see it for shovel, pencil, totem pole, so these things that have this cylindrical shape, because the language is always, Tlingit is always classifying things, which is why we have classifiers, which we'll talk about on Tuesday. And so you just keep it, Tlingit is wonderful for, if you like to put things in little categories and boxes, and Tlingit is built for you. Okay, the other types of nouns you have are borrowed nouns. So these come from other Na-Dene languages, or perhaps from Tsimshian, or perhaps from Haida, or there's a lot of them that come from Chinook jargon. This is what they just started calling it somewhere. It was adopted. And then there's a few that come from Russian, and there's a bunch that come from English. For example, wash. Wash,
Wash.
wash,
Wash.
wink,
Wink.
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 There's also wasus atachani, which is, it's hard to break that one down. It seems like the love inside, or maybe being near the inside of a cow's breast. I like that one because it's more literal. So people think about what they're putting on their Cheerios. Chach,
Charge.
chach,
Charge.
schoon,
Schoon.
schoon,
Schoon.
which is also schoon. So sometimes the S becomes an SH for some speakers. And these are, a lot of these are what we call Tlingish. So it's to Tlingitize a word. A lot of times too, they'll have elders who will look at something, think about what that thing does, and then describe what that thing does. Or sometimes they'll say, oh, this looks like this thing that we have. And then they'll use it for that. Any questions? So the other concept that we move to now that we've got common nouns down is within these we have a concept called alienability. Is it alienable or is it inalienable, right? And that all that means is, can it stand alone or not? And the best example is body parts. Body parts have to belong to something, right? You can have them built into verbs, but if you walked in the room and there was a hand, it would be strange, and you would probably wonder, whose hand is that, right? If we came into our classroom and there was a hand, I do Janice away, right? So we would ask about it. Whose hand is that? And body parts, when they get separated, they gain a possessive suffix, right? So the possessive suffix tells us how that noun functions. And the other part that's inalienable, sometimes there's certain parts. And so in the past, in dictionaries, and in all the previously published dictionaries, usually this or ut or d, those are the three things that you would see before it. And if you've been studying Tlingit for a while, maybe you use the Nash Story Dictionary. It was not alphabetical. There was no, you couldn't like look things up from English. You just had it in these categories, right? Household objects, people, body parts. And so if you heard a word, you'd have to dig through the whole thing and just sort of try and find it. And then the Lear Dictionary came out, which is the most comprehensive noun dictionary that's ever been made. Wonderful. And then that has it alphabetized by Tlingit and alphabetized by English, and then according to these categories, what type of word is it? The Edwards Dictionary came out, and that combined a lot of verbs, giving you some verb forms so that you can say it in a perfective form, an imperfective form, a repetitive form. All of those dictionaries would list it like this. So you'd have du tla, but it would be listed under the TL. Du sh, that would be listed under SH. Let's just say some of these together so you guys have, I'm speaking it to you. Du tla,
Du tla.
du tla,
Du tla.
du sh,
Du sh.
du sh,
Du sh.
akaye,
Akaye.
akaye,
Akaye.
atkate,
Akate.
atkate.
Akate.
So for some of them, the pronoun is built in, like atkate. That's usually what you say for it. And so some of them, it's just built in, it's permanently there. Other ones, it just serves as a placeholder. So the work that's been done in the last few years, we're starting to write it with a long dash in front of it. That long dash means there's got to be something there. It's got to be a pronoun or something, right? So like, but some of them like akaye, you can just say that. And so it depends. If it's frozen in there, sort of, we'll write it as atkate or akaye. But you could say, you know, kaya akaye for like a dress pattern that you were to buy at a fabric store or something. Okay?
Long dash makes it easier because then everything was do.
Yeah, because then people would say du tla, right? And this is instead saying This is a fill in the blank, but you need to have something there. But and do are the defaults. And you're going to say this a lot. And you're going to find this with other words like da is about something, but it needs to be, right, about. Because if I were speaking English, I say, I'm going to tell you about, right, that it leaves you hanging, right? Maybe I like to leave you in suspense. Maybe I don't know how English works. Maybe I'm just a little strange. But if I say, I'm going to tell you about it, right? Or I'm going to tell you about basketball. Right? So that's the same thing in Tlingit where you could say, what am I going to tell you about? Yesh da iin kakwanik. Or I could say, yesh adat iin kakwanik. So the can pop in there. And there's just ways to do this that creates variance. And as you listen to speakers and pay attention to Tlingit, look how people are doing that. Okay, we're going to do some more lists, but we should take we got started late, but we should take a short break. Take 5, and we'll come back and we'll see if there are any questions, and then we'll move into kinship terms, body parts, and go from there. 5 minutes.
I'm tired.
I'm gonna go to Seattle.
Jeez, $90 one way, that's insane.
I'm gonna look at it right now.
They took all the school supplies out of that vending machine.
Yeah, I saw that.
They have a little closet in that like really cramped store in the cafeteria building that has some school supplies, but I don't know if they have whiteboards. They have like those notebooks and everything. Snacks, bread.
Bread and butter, cheapest. $4.
It's interesting though that you could say spoon or spoon. Is that like up to the speaker? Do you think that's dialectical? Because
I don't know.
Tsimshian and Sinagia, it's very dialectical whether it's S or SH.
Huh.
They're
That's a good
interchangeable based on dialect. So some people say Sinagia, and some people say
that's right.
Sinagia.
Right.
And
Because,
Metlakatla seems to prefer the SH sound, but some places in BC don't have that, and they substitute it for S.
it seems to be personal choice, but I don't know. I just remember Johnny Marks would use the SH consistently. So it was like stu, or he would stu, shkoon. But I'm not sure what.
You're looking at ticket prices. Is it really $90?
Yeah, $95 each way.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was 150 round trip. On Delta. You wouldn't get all your miles.
Are they good times for the flights though?
Well, I would be leaving like a Friday evening and coming back on.
Oh, okay. You just.
I'm gonna do it though because I'm gonna go on the weekend before my birthday. My birthday's on a Monday this year, so.
But then you're paying for 3 nights at a hotel.
Or I'm gonna call people I know in Seattle and it'll just be like fun.
Okay.
Or just wander around the streets 3 days.
The last night.
Let's go. Okay, any questions? Okay, we're back. We're gonna do kinship terms, body parts. This is an edited list of body parts. Certain ones have been taken out just to avoid the book being banned in high schools and junior high schools. I think in Tlingit, the body parts are sometimes fun. I don't think it's as controversial necessarily as it is in English. The future dictionary will have, there's a lot of body parts that aren't in some of the other dictionaries as well. So you really get into specifics. And I think it's similar to English in that the more sort of culturally embarrassing the body part can be, the more variations of names it tends to have. Right, so there's lots of ways you can say certain things in English. I believe the same things exist in Tlingit, and a lot of them are metaphors as well. So. But that's for a future private lesson.
I
Okay,
should just have a whole class on
that'd be fun.
dirty words and Tlingit.
Well, and the really fun thing about body parts is we'll see, and we'll do kinship terms first, but with body parts, in the future you can come back to these body parts and you'll see how they can be stacking together, right? So you have a head, and you have a fingertip, you have a finger head, and you have a knee head, and you have a shoulder, an upper arm head, and this is how they work because they tend to stack. And they can get really long, and you could say things like du, ach, us, ek, ak, ki, right? And we could say it together without all the spaces, and that's toe jam, right? The trash in between the fingers of my feet. And then we'll see how Tlingit looks at body parts different. But first, we'll just take a look. So this is what this longer hyphen looks like. We call it an N dash, E-N. There's a hyphen or dash. A little bit longer is called an N dash. And a little bit longer than that is called an M dash, E-M.
How do you make them? Do you just press the dash button?
You install the Tlingit keyboard if you have a Mac, and you push the Alt key and the dash button.
Okay.
And it gives you the longer dash. And then I think the Shift and Alt gives you the M dash.
I tried installing it onto my laptop, which wasn't a Mac, and it crashed my.
Yeah, you cannot put it on a non-Mac, but you can do.
That's like
The
it has
language-
the little
the
thing in
language
the
key.
corner and you changed it to like a little like flag
Yeah,
thing.
so it's up here. No, maybe mine doesn't display, but there should be a little chokeat blanket. I can
Mine's
switch
a little
mine.
Alaska flag. Which one did I download?
Oh, that would be the Language Geek Northwest. Coast
Oh yeah,
keyboard.
that one.
So it should be a little chokeat blankets, and I've got another one that's Hawaiian for my Hawaiian work. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so this is what it looks like.
Wait, what's the other one then? What's the one that has the Chilkat blanket?
That's the Crippen keyboard,
Okay.
which you can go to tlingitlanguage.com under resources. I think it's under the print and web, all the way at the bottom. And I think I've got the Language Geek one there as well, which is what you'd use for
Windows.
Windows. There's Cheesh, and Pashuk says typing hyphen twice on Microsoft Office products will generally autocorrect to an M dash. And I think if you type 3, it should do an M dash. And as far as what the function grammatically typically is, an N dash should technically be used when noting a series of numbers, right? June 3rd to June 12th should have an N dash.
Rather than the little short one.
Technically, an M dash is usually like a stronger version of a comma, so it offsets certain things. Like if you had a sentence and then you had this big aside, then you came back in. You can use parentheses or commas or an M dash, depending how much you aside. Okay, so for example, if you looked it up, you'd have sha, but you would need to put something there in order to use it properly in Tlingit. So here's some examples we'll use. Achsha, achsha, cake sha, cake sha. So then same thing with mother. Dutla, dutla, Gojtla. So we see we can just substitute there. There has historically been a little bit of confusion or debates or personal preference on animals and whether that should have a possessed form like Kate Shaw. My understanding is it gets the possessed form if it's been removed. And a lot of times people would see it with the possessive marker on there, because when you name a clan house, you're naming it with parts. So there'll be like, there might be Keet Uhu Hit, Killer Whale's Tooth House. It has the possessive marker, but that's because you're thinking of like a killer whale tooth, not like, look at this killer whale, because rarely would you talk about its teeth. I mean, I guess if you're talking about, but you wouldn't like point at the teeth, because
Then you're worried. Yeah, then there's like.
then it's there with his mouth open, which is
Which you have
unusual.
other things.
Okay, so now let's shift to kinship. The way that Tlingit kinship works is it is all rooted in your clan and your clan relationship to others, although it could also involve personal relationships, right? Like let's say your, one example would be if I'm a Raven clan, somebody else is an Eagle clan, I think you shouldn't call that person a Chuni, because Chuni is reserved for people of the same moiety as you. So you could call them Achkani, but if that person was from the same clan as your father, then you should be calling them by a closer kinship term than that, like Achsani or Achish, however close you sort of feel to them. So there's a number of ways that kinship works. One is your clan's relationship to that clan. If your clans are from the same community, you should be expressing that by using close kinship terms with those folks, right? So your opposites, if they're female, akhat, if they're male, akhsani. And same thing, but then there's also the relationship that your name has. For example, there was an elder named Charles DeWitt who lived in Haines, and when he found out my name was Kone, that was his paternal uncle. So whenever he saw me, he'd call me Akhsani, my uncle. Right? And he's 60 years older than I am. And so, maybe not that much, but he's much older than I am. And so the personal and the kinship trumps the personal relationship. But the personal relationship influences that. Another example is if somebody is a different clan but the same moiety, you would probably call that person Achoni. If there's no existing family tie, kinship tie, close tie with your name, but if that person becomes your BFF, then you might have to start calling them, Achkik. And it becomes a negotiation too. Like I was becoming really close friends with someone, and he called me Achkik. And I said, how old are you? Right? Because there's this thing about age as well. For people in the same gender as you, if they're older, you would call them different than if they're younger. But if they're the other gender, then you would call them, it's just a generic, right? So for males, there's Achuk is my older brothers, Achkik is my younger brothers. And when we say brothers and sisters, we're talking about all the people in your clan who are the same generation as you. Doesn't matter if you got the same parents or not. This is how Tlingit views kinship. And it varies sometimes from person to person, but this is a good framework to get, because sometimes our view of kinship is very influenced by American or Canadian or just North American. So these are things to think of. It can also change tremendously. There was an elder that I worked with a lot. She said, I want your daughter to have my name. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. Okay. And then the next time I called her, she said, Achish. And she called me Dad from then until she passed away. And so it can change. And it could change the other way too, right? Like you're really close with somebody, so you call them a kinship term, but then something terrible happens, and it should be really terrible. It's not like, you ate my birthday cake. It should be like terrible. And, these things shouldn't happen. I think they probably have when people stop using specific kinship terms. But I wouldn't recommend it. I always say, love each other. Okay? So here we go. We're going to run through this. We're not going to use a pronoun, but you must use a pronoun for these. What are some examples of pronouns? Possessive pronouns, yeah.
It do.
Ach, it, do. Okay?
Ha, ye, hastu.
Ha, ye, hastu. Okay, and then we're going to come back to these pronouns after we do this in the body parts. And then Tuesday we'll come back and we'll finish this. You guys should be on to the next chapter as well. You should be reading all of the text that's in here. It should help you understand it. That way we come in and we just practice these things. Okay, so we'll do, how about we do this? You guys will practice reading the Tlingit. So I would like to send it around the room. When I go online, I see Washington, California, Yukon, Kotzebue, Juneau. That's the order we'll go in. I think it all looks different to you guys. And those of you in Whitehorse, you can go around the whole room. And I would like you to say, so we'll start here, and I would like you to say it, and then I will say it, and everybody says it. Okay? So this is just a chance to practice reading some Tlingit and then to hear it, then to all say it collectively. Okay, and this is how we're going to do this list, and this is what we'll do for the next 27 minutes. There is a film tonight on the Cherokee language. Feel free to check it out if you want to catch. You're going to miss the first 30 minutes of it. I will try and get a link. I didn't get to that before today. But I'll try and get a link like I did for the other two, send it your way. And if that works, next Thursday we'll spend a little bit of time in class talking about these 3 films on languages. Okay, who wants to go first?
Just want to go around.
Let's just go around.
Yinana.
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 So this is it's not just, it says matrilineal line, but it's actually just a line. So you could say, Ach kla yinana. And that means my mother's side. Ach ish yinana. My father's side. So it really refers to a side of, or a whole line, you know. And when we say like Hashagun, that means our ancestors, but you say Achshagun, my lineage. Right? And this is how it works when you start talking about this stuff. And this is good to learn how to do, because when you encounter elders, there are a lot of times they're going to want to know who you are, where you're from, who's your people. And this is how you do that stuff in the language.
Khuni.
Khune.
Khuni. Kla.
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 Wait, your turn, my turn, everybody's turn. Don't take my line. Okay, we'll try again.
Kla.
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 Okay. Kuch.
Clock.
Kla.
Kla.
Tuwutlitzinku.
Cock.
Ka.
Kla.
There's an elder I work with. He loves telling a funny story about somebody who mixed English and Tlingit with that one. I'll just leave it at that. White horse.
Shot.
Shit. Okay, keep them short when they're short. And again, this is a female's older sister.
Geek.
Keek. This is a female's younger sister or a male's younger brother.
Eek.
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 Okay, sheesh. Pasuk.
Hunks.
Hunk. Okay. Let's see. Uchqanch. Bye.
Shlak. Which one am
Yeah, one.
I? Shlak.
Glock.
Kla.
Kikyeti.
Kikyeti.
Kikeri. Kesh.
Keish.
Kesh.
So Keish is a niece or nephew of the same clan or moiety. So this is one generation down.
Raven's favorite words.
Kwai.
Huayi.
Kwai. Shawu.
Shabu.
Shawu.
So we're watching the tone, we're watching the vowel length. Kuwuch.
Gunit. Kanaye.
Qunait kanayi.
Kunait. Kunai.
This is a word that's probably not being used as much as I would hope anyways, and it means my clan opposites. Clan opposites, or somebody's clan. Okay?
Connie.
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 This is the one Raven really likes. Connie. Kani. He says that when he's asking somebody for something. Okay.
Ish.
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 Odd.
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 Sunny.
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 Ashuk.
Yeah, I can't see this. I
Oh.
can't see the screen. It's on someone else's video. I gotta look it up on.
Okay, hold on. Let me. Is it on now?
Yeah. Cough.
Kosh.
Kosh.
Let me put this in presentation mode so it shouldn't switch now. Okay. Chish. Aya.
Shut.
Shet.
Shut. Shut. Woo. Woo.
Woo.
Woo.
All stay together now. Icheshgadi.
It shut.
Oh, this one.
On.
Chan.
Chan. It shut.
Yichet.
It shut.
So that one is a combination of son, wife. Oh, kubuch.
Sechach.
Seichuch.
Say who.
And that's a combination. Daughter, husband. Oh. Tuushitzinku.
Shahadi.
Or we can do that one instead. Shawati.
Shawati.
Okay. White horse.
Kawu.
Kabu.
Call.
In-aw.
In-ah.
Khan'a.
Chana.
Hana.
And these two, they tend to blend together. So a lot of people will say ina, ina, and chana. So they're written with a space, but usually you'd say achana, and it would sound like it comes out like one word. In would be the one who is with whoever, like ach in the one who's with me. Achana, the one who's beside me. Right? That's how those work. And these are ways you can, as people start dating, marrying, and doing stuff like that. This is how it works. And some of these are gender specific, but that doesn't mean that they have to apply to specific genders, right? So people can have same gender relations, and that would work just fine. They would use shawati, kawu, and that's how they work. So try to keep it as, and there are some though that keep gender in mind, like a mother-in-law, a father-in-law, and the gender of siblings also is one that's usually specified. Okay, who went last?
Yadi.
Yeti.
Yeti.
Okay. Aya.
Yetki.
Yetki.
Yeti.
See.
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 Yeet.
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 Tashkhan.
Tachhan.
Tachan. Ashi.
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 I don't know where that one is used. It's not used very often. If I find out, I'll let you guys know.
Is that paternal? Is that what it is?
I don't know.
Like father's father?
No, I've heard about it, and I think they were referring to a grandmother. I don't know. Could be a dialect thing. If anybody knows, let me know. Usually I hear, geez, do I have grandparent on there? Okay. L, high toned E, E, L, K, apostrophe, W. I will add that to the notes. Add please.
You have that on page 29.
Oh, goodness, geez, okay. Whew, that is going to get in trouble. Please. Okay. Whose turn is it now? Who did? Oh, okay. Kubuch, Ifra. Right here.
Dakanuchu.
Dakanuchu. So this is a compound. Da is around. Ka is on. Da ka though means around the outside of something, like encompassing it. Nu is a shell. So my outer shell, the way David Katzik explained this to me, or to a class of ours, was it's your mother's father's father.
So would you use Daka to like talk about Two Train?
Talk about what?
What is that song, Two Train? The part where it go around the outside?
Oh yeah, I guess yeah. They would go adaka. They would go around the outside.
It's mother's father's father.
That's a. Oh wait, no. I think it's
Mother's
mother's father. Is that correct?
I thought that's what.
Okay, yeah. Mother's father. I'm confused. I gotta straighten that out. I got confused. Maybe another note to myself.
So grandmother's father.
Yes. So it should be your mother's father's clan. Sheesh.
Maternal grandmother's father.
Sure. Mother, father.
Claw, do, ease.
There it is.
Everybody's an in-law.
But the Dakanuku is a special relationship. That is the clan that protects you, and it also is the clan that you protect the relationship of. And you protect the relationship of all clans. The kinship structure shows you how we are related. It's very important. I think when you remove the Tlingit language, the kinship system is really hard to reconstruct through English. Okay. Tuwushitzinku.
Sayi.
So this, for example, if somebody was sitting right next to me and they had the name Hune, I would say, Sayi, this is my name, right? And it's the same way you talk about your own name. So it's also a kinship term for saying somebody who has the same name as you. Okay. On to White Horse.
Yakawu.
Yakawu.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a partner, like a trading partner. This is another one that Raven really liked to use. Okay.
Augie.
Okay.
Okay.
This means the one that's next to me, mine next to me. That's what it means.
I think in
The
some
side.
of the Downhard books, I think they specifically list. I think Mark specifically used that to refer to a clan sibling.
Oh, interesting.
I think so.
Okay,
But
I'll check it out. Sheesh.
How is that different from Hune? Hune.
So Huni would be Huni. Afi, I think, would stress that there's a special clan relationship there. And Huni is this general. Huni is saying we are related or we are pals, but it's not much closer than that, right? So this is just like a Kani. You are someone who is on the eagle side, that I know, right? And then it gets closer than that if you, and so I think those are the most distant that it could be, other than just not being related at all. If anybody's Tlingit, so as soon as they come in, you should see their clan with them. so that you know how to address them in case things get serious. And that those things can happen. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll do some pronouns, and we'll just do these ones a little different. I'll say them. Everybody repeat them. And then you can see the translation there. Ach.
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 Eh.
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 Du.
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 Ha.
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 Ye.
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 Hastu.
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 Ka.
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 So this one is one that does not. Like you could say it in English. You could say like people's mothers, or you could just say mothers, right? So the way you would say mothers in Tlingit is ka, tla, the mothers of people, right? And so it has a very special function in the language. We're going to see it in a lot of different places in a few different forms. So again, if you just took one of these kinship terms and you can apply, so you have acheti, eyeti, duyeti, hayeti, yiyeti, hastuyeti, kayeti, right? So, and then this is how they work, is you learn how to fill in the blanks. These are what you can put into the blanks. Okay? When we get into ha, there are some that have a special relationship, and so the cultural meaning changes. So whenever you have languages, you have what could be considered the straight linguistic meaning, and then you have what does this mean when you say it. And these are some that change. The ha, like you would write these in capital letters, I think. And I should probably do that. So, but as we go through, hashagenya,
Hashagenya.
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 So this thing that is kind of around or above our heads, in this vicinity. Hashagun.
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 Hashuka.
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 Hatlagu konkiyan.
Hakagu Honkiyan.
Hatlagu konkiyan.
Hakagu Honkiyan.
Hananaye.
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 So when we talk about this, Hatlagu konkiyan is our ancient ones. And so when we say Tlagu, Tlagu is like way back. We're talking like geologic time. Kukawu would be the people long time ago, like hundreds of years. Tlagu, for me, goes into beyond hundreds of years, like thousands of years. Okay? And then there's a set of kinship terms. A lot of kinship terms, you would just, if you're talking directly to the person, this is a case where you can drop the pronoun. But it's a little bit of a different function. So like when you say my mother, my mom, and mom, right? A lot of it's sort of inflection in English. Clay, Klee, Ish, Sik, Yitk, Keshk, Kashk, Sheesh, Chunk. And we're going to see this K apostrophe business next week and talk about exactly what that is and how it works. But it really implies closeness, love, and being little and cute. It's really the ways that thing works. And it pops up, and you see it pops up for daughter, son, niece, nephew, when you're talking directly to them, and also to the grandchild. It's built into the sheesh. I don't know if it's necessarily that simple or not. Okay. So then we hear yeti a lot, and so we'll hear these in the love songs. If you're composing love songs in Tlingit, if you are a clan you would put, and usually in that first verse, a lot of times you would have like shukach adi yeti. And then maybe to show solidarity with another clan, you might in the second verse put qanachtei yeti. Because you're saying, we're both from the same community, same kwan, we share a lot of kids. And so this song is sung to the children of shukach adi and the children of qanachtei. So you're tying yourself to the children of your clan, and you're tying yourself to another clan of the same moiety in the same song. You see lots of love songs that do that. And when you hear those songs, you stand up and you dance for your father's people. So when you hear the yeti, to be a child of a clan, that means this is what my father is. Everybody okay? So these are a couple of illustrations that are designed to show how the kinship system works, with dotted lines being the opposite clan and straight lines being the same clan. This is assuming that someone has married into the opposite clan, which is fine. The way that people do things is fine, but this is just saying in the traditional structure of a Tlingit kinship, this is how these things are thought of. And sometimes there's lots of lines going in all different directions because we've got to keep track of who's who. But it's really just either the same moiety, yes or no? Are they the same generation, yes or no? Does it go up or down by 1 or 2? And that's how you decide which kinship term to use. And so the kinship terms, like as far as how we address each other, we can use each other's names as a greeting when we see each other, right? You can say, Nawaya. But if that person has a close clan relationship to you or a close blood relationship to you, the kinship term would be used, right? And we see this in English, right? In Tlingit families, when somebody sees them, they might say, hello, nephew, right? And so if they were speaking Tlingit, they would do the same. Keish. For a lot of our speakers, this comes from Tlingit, where the kinship term is a perfect greeting for when you see somebody.
I think it's like, because I see a lot in a lot of Native families just to say like son or daughter, just to start talking to them. And I don't see that so much outside of the Native community. It's really a nice feeling to have someone just be like, say that.
Right, because it shows how we're connected. Okay, so I think maybe we'll save, I don't know. Are there any questions? We have 5 minutes. If there's no questions, we'll jump into body parts. Okay, let's keep sending them around like we were before. A lot of these come from Jeff Lear's notes. He was the person who got all the body parts, which can be R-rated in English, right? Like, we can't say that. But they're pretty fun. And we'll go over some of the other ones in another lesson. Okay, Gook. I don't know where we were, so we'll just start over.
Da.
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 And so there's da again. So da can, and it's kind of a homonym. I think the first one is about or around, and the second one is body. So you say da wa'uz. He washed his body.
Da shagun.
Da shagun.
Da shagun.
So there we see the shagun part, which on its own means parts, components, tools.
Da shi.
Da shi.
Da shi.
And the shi is a limb, like a branch of a tree. Kuguk.
Da it.
Da it.
Da it.
Da it u.
Da it.
Da it tu.
So sometimes we're going to have these repeating consonants in Tlingit. Tu means inside, right? So this is the coordination or the care, the inside of a body. Da it tu. And then you can get other compounds. Da it tunik. sickness inside the body, arthritis, da'it which would mean that somebody who is just really super shaky, like their body's not strong inside. And this is how you're going to start complaining about all your aches and pains and everything else. Very important. Okay, white horse.
Da'it-hu.
Da'it-hu. A couple chapters from now, we're going to get into the really details of da, tu, hu, words like that. Hu means to be among, right? So this means among, in the area of the body, right? So you could say hu yanif if you were just aching all over the place, like you had the flu or something.
Duke.
Duke. This is where duktut comes from. It's skin or complexion. If it's removed, ziskdugu, moose hide. Right? It's a hide if it has dugu.
Would you say dugu?
No, fish skin is different. It's,
You can make stuff out of it though.
but so fish flesh and fish skin are different nouns. We'll go. I think those are coming.
Because they're different.
The different textures, I think. Yeah.
and they
But you
look
could
different.
say, somebody posted something about a weird line from Silence of the Lambs, and I said, "Kaduguye awo." He wore the skins of people.
Yeah.
Frightening, and then
How would
frightening
you say
down.
it puts the lotion on it?
It. Okay, I'll think about it.
Okay.
Puts lotion on its skin. That would be nays. Any other questions?
Why are body parts so much censored, though? I mean, why is the language censored? If you're going to have language courses and things, you have to drop that mindset of the language that does the censoring.
Right.
Because you can't learn what is going on just because another culture says,
Right.
it's a bad word.
I think,
mean,
yeah, there's, okay.
I ran into this problem studying the Turkish language, where in English, primarily English-speaking teacher wouldn't teach you something, but a Turkish teacher would, because it's an integral part of the language.
Right.
You can't refer to whatever it is without that knowledge.
Well, I have two thoughts. One is somebody who wasn't thinking about being embarrassed, but made a comment saying, if you're teaching Tlingit, why do you got to teach all of these body parts? Why don't you just do that somewhere else? And my thought was, as we start to learn about nouns, you can name so many of them in English, right? Because you talk about them, right? And then maybe you're saying, stick it up your butt, or you're saying, oh man, I pulled a hip flexor, or wherever that thing is. I don't know. And so you learn how to talk about things. Learn from me. But I think you need them. I think the censorship comes, the earlier ones, the ones who really did a wonderful job documenting their language were missionaries. And I had this conversation with Dick Dowenhauer because he's like, they got all the verbs. They got them all. And I said, can't poop, can't pee, can't make more people. And we're going to learn those things. Sometimes people fund projects, and if they fund a project and they say, take this out so it doesn't get kicked out of schools. But you got to prepare yourself for the world, and it'll be in the dictionary, and we'll cover it in this class because this isn't a junior high, and those parts are fun. There's all kinds of names. Everybody has a tukhe, and they have a eh. That's awesome. You had a two-mouthed person, right? And so,
Raven's nose.
yeah, and
Story, and that was kind of censored, I believe.
yeah, a lot of them were. Or
I mean, there's the internal cultural censorship, things that a Tlingit would be embarrassed about. And then there's those things that Euro-American or Anglo-Saxon mental thoughts is going to be embarrassed about. You can't mix those two. I can understand elders not wanting to talk about something because it's taboo in Tlingit. But then, you know, you have that aspect that's being shut out, and then you also have the aspect of Anglo-American, and then what you're left with is a narrower window.
Right. Well, it's common in a lot of languages that certain things are funny. Right? And even in English, there's a lot of things that are funny, but in certain mixed company, right, your fart jokes get limited.
I came up. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I came up with a pretty terrible joke about censorship. I was talking to a couple people like, I'm never going to learn these things because it's taboo to talk about, so we need to start a group instead of the XXX language learners. We'll be the language learners.
Excellent. Yes, and so the other component to it, I believe, is there's a fear that the world, that the white world that surrounds us is going to judge us and say, oh, look, they're just crude. When you do these things in English as well. So I don't have a problem using them, teaching them, and talking about the cultural context. You know, there's certain elders I work with. When the women are gone, it changes, the conversation changes dramatically, right? And then he'll tell you about the guy who stood up in church and said, this is my cock, right? Which is hilarious, right? And so in quoting that. And then there's other things that you can do in the language which are very fun. And it's to say it's not just men talk, but sometimes if it's men among men and women among men, it's very similar in other languages. There were this group of females who were elders and people who were younger, and it was a language immersion, and they were picking berries. And the conversation started with, well, we should get phrases on how to pick berries. So it started with, is it ready? Feel it? Is it hard? And it just got hilarious, right? And it's got funny, and it's fun. I think people enjoy those situations, and they're fun, and we should be allowed to have fun. And if you want to revitalize a language, you need to use it for everything, right? And so we can take, in Hawaii, like, sex is not an embarrassing conversation. It's just not. And so a lot of times we've got to look at how did we talk about these things before, how do we resurrect that way, and then how do we talk about them now so that we're, you know, this will be the last thing I think, well, I'll see if there are any other questions. Somebody found a dissertation on Tlingit that was done in like the 1960s or 70s or something. And it was done in English. It was done by someone who's not Tlingit. He's interviewing these Tlingits. And in there was a section where this guy's saying, there's certain things that are just hilarious in Tlingit, right? So he eats it through his butthole. That is the perfect ending for the raven and the deer story. And he says, for example, in the story he told was this guy liked to sleep in just a long t-shirt, nothing underneath. And he had a kitten, and the kitten came up and saw his balls hanging down and started batting at them like they were a toy. And so he throws the kitten. That is hilarious in English and super hilarious in Tlingit. But in the wrong company, that could become uncomfortable. And we've got to also recognize that some people don't always want to talk about all these different things. But we'll go for it. Any other questions? And you can tell people I taught to, but you don't have to tell them. You say, oh, I just found it in the book.
This wasn't in class.
Right? Just don't watch that class. Okay. Anyways, I don't think it's a shameful thing. You okay? Last chance. Thanks for hanging. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We should have it straightened out in the future. Cheesh, time. Uchaya.
Oh, it's already over?
Yeah, that's 7:00.
Damn.
One.
Rebecca.